School Quarterly goes throughout the entire world, and it's translated, et cetera, et cetera. So if you have any questions regarding that or anything else with his near 40 years working at the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, then you can think of those. We'll have 2 mics, and we'll rove. But first, what we'll do is have a word of prayer, okay? Thank you, Father, for our time of fellowship this afternoon. Thank you for the food. Thank you for everyone that worked in the kitchen to be able to provide that, and those who provided the food, Lord. What a delight to be able to fellowship over food, and now to continue to fellowship over this talk that Cliff is going to give over his conversion story, Lord. We know that the Holy Spirit worked in his life, and just as much as the Holy Spirit works in all of our lives. So bless our time together. We ask and pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Cliff, it's all yours.
I grew up in a Jewish home, but it was very secular. I joked the way we kept the holidays was, they try to kill us, they failed, let's eat. That was the extent of even that much of my religious training. And because I grew up secular, I grew up very postmodern. Very much a child of the age. You have your truth, and that's your truth. You have your truth, and that's yours. And it didn't matter if they were logically contradictory, because there was no Archimedean, transcendent God's view of things. Truth was cultural, relative, personal, whatever. And that's how I was raised, and that's how I passionately believed. Now, I was always somewhat that, I didn't realize it, but people later said, Cliff, you were always a seeker. But anyway, I always liked to read, and I liked to read philosophy. And I can remember I was about 21 years old, and I was sitting in a pizza parlor in Gainesville, Florida. I'm in college, and I'm eating a pizza. I'm drinking, let's just say, a non-Adventist beverage. And I'm reading this philosopher. And he said something, or actually it was a book about the philosopher. And it said something that just instantly changed my life. And it was something to the effect of, in order to know the reason, in order to live the most perfect life, you had to find out the reason why you were here and then live accordingly. Well, at that moment, it shattered. And the way I describe it is like this. Look, here was the pizza sitting on the table in front of me. Okay? Now, you could have had 1,000 different people with 1,000 different views on how the pizza got there. Maybe they thought the god Marduk created the pizza and dropped it out of the sky. Maybe aliens in a flying saucer. Maybe it evolved. You could have had 1,000 different people with 1,000 different views. Maybe they'd start a religion based on their views of the pizza. And you could have had 10,000 people with 10,000 views of the pizza, and maybe every single one of them was wrong. Maybe it would be impossible for anybody to know how the pizza got there. But what you couldn't deny, and what I couldn't deny, was the pizza is here. Somewhere out there. Somewhere, whether any human being could know it or not, something had to explain the origin, the purpose of the pizza, how it got there. And that explanation, whatever it was, that was the truth about the pizza. Okay? Well, then I just extended it. Well, hey, look, I'm here. I exist. I had to come from somewhere. The sky above me. Something had to explain it. The earth, the cosmos, all creation, it's here. Somewhere out there had to be the explanation for this reality. And just as whatever the explanation for the pizza was, that was the truth about the pizza, something to explain all the cosmos, that had to be the truth about all existence with a capital T. In other words, suddenly it just hit me right then and there that, wow, the truth had to exist. Now, the fact that I knew it had to exist, that was a totally separate issue, a total different metaphysics, if you want, from the idea that I or anyone could know it. Okay, in other words, I knew I can't be wrong. Something is here. The cosmos is here. Something had to explain it. But that was a totally different issue, whether I or anyone could ever know it. And all I know is I remember I walked out. I was in that Gainesville about a year ago, and I took a photo of where I was. I was walking down the street outside of the pizza parlor. I mean, my worldview had shattered because I suddenly realized, wow, the truth, it had to exist. And I remember walking, and I felt it so strongly. I felt the pain in my chest. Remember thinking, oh, if it were humanly possible to know this truth. I thought, and don't ask me why, I think now I know why, but at the time, why? I thought, if I could know it, I wanted to know it. And again, I felt the pain. That's how strongly I felt it. I thought, if I could know it, because I knew it had to be out there. I thought, if I could know it, I wanted to know it. I didn't care where it led me, what it cost me, what I had to suffer, what I had to give up. And that was, believe me, a big if I could know it, I wanted to know it no matter what. And all I know is about 3 years later, I became a Seventh-day Adventist. Now, that's remarkable for a number of reasons. First of all, growing up, this is terrible, but it's the truth. Growing up, I knew only one Seventh-day Adventist, and he was my dope dealer. He used to sell me drugs. And I'm not kidding. We would get stoned, and he would witness to me about his religion, And I thought he must have been some kind of white Rastafarians or something because they smoked pot. Now, this actually has a happy ending because he came back to the Lord and married into some big Adventist family, maybe 40 miles from the GC. And we once had lunch together at the GC. And he was the only Adventist I knew. But again, you had to wait 25 years later for that. Now, the other thing, it was remarkable for me becoming an Adventist because, and I mean this too, there were two kinds of people in my life I really hated. I hated Christians, and I hated vegetarians. I was so carnivorous. I used to make fun of I was once on a tour in the Soviet Union, and this girl sitting next to me was a vegetarian, and I mocked her so much she started crying, okay? So now my animosity towards Christianity, though, was a little deeper seated than that because even though I wasn't raised a religious Jew, I was still Jewish. I knew it was Jewish and all. Miami Beach, And for secular Jews, our religion is the Holocaust. Okay, I could have named you every Nazi concentration camp in Europe and told you how many Jews they killed there. I couldn't have told you the 10 Commandments. You know, and all this, and what the Germans did, they just picked up from centuries. The Yellow Star, they got that from the Roman Catholic brothers and sisters. All this stuff happening in it culminated in the Holocaust. But all this persecution done in the name of Jesus by all these people, and I hated Christianity over it. And I used to vent my anger out. I was at the University of Florida at Gainesville, and there was this hellfire and brimstone itinerant preacher. His name was Jed Smock, and Jed used to come to the campus, and he'd have his Bible in his hand, and he'd be preaching hellfire and brimstone, you know, and this and that, and there'd be a crowd of students around him. And they would heckle him, but I was never content to stand in the circle. I would get in this guy's face. I'd curse him. I'd curse his mother. I'd curse his God. I mean, he was charismatic. He'd put his hands on me and speak in tongues. You know, I'd writhe like, you know, and mock. And he swore there was no hope for me. He swore that there was no, and my friends eventually nicknamed me Heckle. Heckle. In fact, I got an email from a guy about 10 years ago. He says, I couldn't remember your first name. I just remembered you as Heckle. But then something happened and he sent me an email and I showed it to my wife. I said, see, all this is true, because he said, I remembered you as Heckle. Well, anyway, this went on for a couple of years, until I graduated the University of Florida in the mid-1970s. And at this time in my life, I had one goal and one goal alone. I was going to be a novelist or nothing. I've got writers and editors in my family. I had an uncle who was very well-respected writer. I have a photograph in my office of my grandfather, who was an editor of a newspaper. And from the time I was little, I knew I was going to be a writer, and then I wanted to be a novelist. And I had started a novel my senior year in college. And before long, this novel dominated my life. Nothing else mattered to me than writing this novel. I wanted to finish school and get that out of the way. And even though I was an English major, outside of a couple of poetry, though actually, more that I thought about it, over the years, some of the things my creative writing teachers taught me stuck with me more than I thought at the time. They helped me more than I thought. But whatever it was, all I wanted to do was work on my novel. So I had put a year into my novel. And then I went back home, and as I said, I grew up in Miami Beach. And I go back to Miami Beach, and all I want to do is work on my novel. And because part of my novel took place in Europe, and I had a little bit of money left over from school, I decided I'm going to go back to Europe. I had been to Europe a couple times. I had lived in Scandinavia. And part of my novel was going to take place there. So I decided I'm going to go back to Europe. I'm going to have to try to find some kind of job to earn a living. And so I fly over and I go to England. And I'm just working on my way around England. And I'm trying to find work or something. And it's not working. And I finally decide, all right, I'm going to go to Sweden. Because I had lived in Sweden. I was fairly fluent in the language, and you could earn good money there. I mean, I was there illegally before. I'd have to be there illegally again. But I was used to that. I've done that a lot, yeah. But anyway, so I decide I'm going to go to Sweden. So I'm hitchhiking. So I hitchhike to the British coast. And then I take a boat from England to the Netherlands. Well, the whole time I'm hitching in England, it's raining on me. And if you've ever been to the Netherlands, well, it rains more in the Netherlands than it rains in England. And I'm on this, and I land, and it's raining, and I'm walking down the gangplank, and I see a guy ahead of me with a backpack. And he's got a sign that says Greece. You know, I think Greece, the sun, the beaches. You know, I'm a Miami Beach boy. And I think, I'm going to Sweden? So I walk right up to him and said, hey, are you hitching to Greece? And he says, yeah. Oh, what a coincidence. So am I. I'll hitchhike to Greece with you. And just like that, I changed my mind. And instead of being on one side of the road heading north, we're on the other side heading south. Well, two guys in the rain with backpacks, we weren't getting any rides. I finally said, hey, man, we'll split up. Maybe I'll see you there, whatever. So anyway, I hitchhike 4 long, hard, hot days. I hitchhiked down. I practically walked through communist Yugoslavia. And I get to Athens. It's later in the day. And I had a friend who I knew at school who had lived there, and he gave me his address. So it's late. 4 days on the road. I'm just burned out. And I finally get to the house, and I knock on the door, and this little old lady comes out. And I say, Faunus, that was his name, is Faunus here? She says, oh, Faunus no here, Faunus in Miami. And I let out a wail, and I guess she felt sorry for me. She brought me in, she fed me a meal, and then an hour later, I'm back out on the streets of this city. I haven't the vaguest idea where I'm going to go, what I'm going to do. I just had no idea, but my biggest problem was just going to sleep. Where am I going to sleep? Well, I found some bushes along a wall. Yeah, I was 22 years old. I didn't sleep. I slept in graveyards before. I don't care. So I find these bushes along a wall, and I lay my sleeping bag out, and I go to sleep. And that night, I have a dream. Now, please understand, I am as secular of a human being, the idea of the supernatural or the transcendent. It was on the level of Santa Claus for me. So dream meant nothing to me. What you ate, did your mother breastfeed you enough as a baby? That kind of stuff. That's all that dreams were. So I go to sleep and I have this dream. And I'm dreaming that I'm sleeping in the bushes. And then I dream that I wake up and I fly to Israel to move to a kibbutz. Do you know, everybody here know what a kibbutz is? Okay, after October. Well, it's a horrible way, and you guys are going to cringe when I say it. Almost think of a commune, okay? It's really a horrible way, but it's like these self-contained communities, and they'll take volunteers. Well, anyway, I have this dream that I wake up, I book a ticket to Israel, I fly to a kibbutz, and work on my novel on the kibbutz in Israel. Okay, that's what I dreamed. Okay, well, when I wake up and I crawl out of a sleeping bag, I think about the dream and I think, wow, that's not a bad idea. And right across the street, why I remember this funny detail, I don't know why, right from where I was sleeping was a travel agency. And it opened at 9 o'clock in the morning. And I went over to the travel agency, booked a ticket, flew to Israel, And 2-3 days later, I was on a kibbutz in Israel working on my novel, because that's all that mattered, but working on my novel just as I had dreamt in the bushes. So I'm on this kibbutz. It's in the north. The Arabs used to shoot rockets over the kibbutz. That we right on the edge of the Golan Heights. I mean, we used to wander into the Golan Heights. We had to stay on paths because there were still Syrian landmines there. And every now and then there'd be a fire and we'd hear the mines go off. But anyway, I'm on the kibbutz and I love it. I work 30 hours a week and all the rest of the time was mine to work on my novel because that's all that mattered to me. Now, I'm going to give you 2 details now that you might think, why am I telling you this now? But you just remember these details. Okay, when I was I'm a writer, and I read, and even to this day, if I'm writing, I read poetry. I mean, yesterday I was working on something. I take a few minutes and I read some poetry just to kind of fuel the juices a little, okay? And there was one book of poetry that I just picked up in a bookstore by this woman named Sylvia Plath. And nothing I had read had impacted me more than this book of poetry. When I later saw friends and told them the story, said, I remember I used to make you sit there, whether you wanted to or not, and make you listen to me read you her poems. I mean, nothing had that book, the stuff devastated me. I mean, in one place she wrote, she gives her kids cookies and milks, goes down, writes this poem, and then sticks her head in an oven and kills herself. I mean, it was kind of heavy stuff, okay? So there's Sylvia Plath. Remember Sylvia Plath. Now, the other thing, too, when I was on the kibbutz, remember this, because you're not going to believe it when I tell you what happened later, but I'm just telling you. When I was on the kibbutz, I had a blonde Danish girlfriend. Her name was Tina. Okay, so remember Sylvia Plath and remember Tina. Okay, well, anyway, I'm on the kibbutz and great, I'm working on my novel, nothing else matters. Well, then who should show up but a group of like 15 fundamentalist Christians from America? I mean, these are the exact same cloth of the guy I used to harangue out in Gainesville. Exact same. And they're these evangelicals, and bless their heart, they're all caught up in Israel and prophecy and the prophecies being fulfilled. And 200 million Chinese are going to invade Israel through the valley of Megiddo. And the church is going to be raptured, and 144,000 Jewish virgins from the 12 tribes of Israel are going to preach the gospel, you know, the whole spiel. Well, putting aside that, I mean, they were very sincere. They loved Israel. They loved the Jews. And they were there on the kibbutz. Well, I was furious. You know, here I am. I'm in the boonies of the only Jewish state since the Bar Kokhba rebellion. What was it, AD 138? Or something like that, and you got these Christians here, you know, and I railed into them. I had years of experience haranguing them, haranguing Christians, and you know, it got out of hand. I didn't get along great with some of the Israelis, you know, Jews and Israelis, and I didn't particularly get along with the Israelis, but these were very good workers. They were diligent workers. So the bottom line is the Jews on the kibbutz threatened to kick me off if I didn't leave those people alone, okay? So I backed off. I didn't care. You know, all I wanted to do was work on my novel. And I actually, over time, I can say this, that no matter how obnoxious I was to them, and I had the loudest, dirtiest mouth, you know, and I laid it on them thick. But I will say that no matter what I did, they never stopped loving me. And that made a difference. Okay. But anyway, I'm on the kibbutz for a year. All I'm doing is I'm working on my novel. I had now put 2 years into my novel. It was my life. Everything was in this book. I mean, I was just as dedicated to this as, I didn't have a life outside of it. The novel controlled my life more than I controlled the life of the characters in there. And if anybody's ever written stuff like that, you might know what I'm talking about. But anyway, I finally decided I want to go back to Europe because part of the novel took place in a place in Denmark, and I decided I was going to go there. So I left the kibbutz and I hitchhiked up to Denmark. And in the city of Copenhagen, there are it's gone now. I've been telling this story for 45 years now, and there are those who remember. In the city of Copenhagen, there had been this vast military barracks. And the military had abandoned it years earlier. And it was like this big hippie commune had just taken over. It was called Christenia. And I think every drug addict and every heroin addict and every criminal in Europe at some point was hanging around there. And I had visited it before, but in the winter. And I didn't remember it. And I get up to Christenia, and it was really a lot sleazier and just a lot skankier than I had remembered it. It really wasn't that great of a place, and just every day someone's dying of a drug overdose, and every now and then the police would come in and raid the place. And it really wasn't the way I had remembered it. Well, I'm there, just to give you an example, I'm there about 2-3 days, and I'm walking through this courtyard, and I hear this woman screaming. And I look over, and there's some woman on the ground, and some guy stomping her and kicking her, and she's screaming. And I'm thinking, that's funny. Oh, that's somebody outside, huh? And anyway, they're stopping her and kicking her. And I'm thinking, I don't want to get involved in this. I don't need this. But I just can't stand that. What am I going to do? So I walk over. And as soon as I walk over, he stops beating on her. And she gets up and runs away. So I thought, did my good deed for the day. So I start to walk away. Well, this guy, I'm not looking. He turns around and he sucker punches me. He just punches me right in the mouth, just slams me. Well, I'm not all that big. I'm not all that strong. It's taken me almost 70 years to get this gut. I'm kind of proud of it, although my wife. But I was never very big. But in college, I used to box. I used to box on a bag all the time. I went into a ring, the boxing ring, one time, and I went back to the bag because the bag never hit me back, okay? I got into the ring and I got pulverized. Well, anyway, he punches me. Well, it's just reflex. I just turn around and boom, 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 flat out laid him out, okay? But the problem, he punched me in the mouth, and my head and my glasses went flying. And I'm telling you, my eyes are soft. I couldn't recognize a single face here. They don't even want to do LASIK on me because, they want to get a perfect record. I said, we're never going to get you. So he punches me. Well, I don't want to be groping for my glasses. So I grab this guy by his head and go, find my glasses, find my glasses. So I get my glasses. And then I say, look, man, go get marriage counseling or something. I don't need, whatever. And I throw him on the ground. Well, as luck would have it, I got a weak knee and a weak back. And just the way I threw him, my knee and my back, usually I'm dealing with one or the other. Well, this time they both give out. And the guy gets up and he pulls out a knife. Says, I'm going to kill you, man. Well, boxing or no boxing, I don't care how good you are. You don't fight. You know, someone pulls a knife, you run. So I'm running down the street. It didn't do my knee and back any good. And it's like Keystone. You guys remember Keystone Cops. It's like Keystone Cops. I'm running down the street yelling, help, police, help. And he's saying, I'm going to kill you. Well, amazingly enough, the police show up. They take us down to the police station. And then an hour later, the cop says, well, we got to let him go. According to Danish law, the knife isn't long enough to make an arrest. Okay? So the bottom line is I'm back out on the street. My knee hurts. My back hurts. I got a fat lip from where he punched me in the mouth. And I go back to this place. So now I got to sit there and look over my shoulder because I'm afraid of this guy. Now, the reason I'm telling this story is things are not going particularly well for me at this point. And then to top it off, I had a friend who lived in another part of town that you're going to have a hard enough time believing what I'm telling you now. You'll never believe some of the backstory to this, so I never tell it. But I go visit this guy in a very nice apartment, very nice part of town. And this guy was heavy into the occult, heavy into spiritualism. Well, that stuff, it's Santa Claus stuff to me. But his apartment, it was creepy. And he was creepy. And it was just, and he would get in these drunken stupors. And he would sit in a chair. And he'd sit there for days. He'd soil himself. And he'd stomp. And he'd shriek. And he'd make these animal noises. And howl. And howl like with sounds I'd never heard before. And I'm looking at this guy. And it was the most, I don't know what to do. And, you know, he's so messed up. And I don't know what to do. You know, this occult stuff. So I look at this guy, said, this guy needs anything. And I said, hey, man, have you ever thought about Jesus? Well, as soon as I say the name Jesus, I'll never forget, he stops the stomping. And he looks up at me with one eye. Okay, just looks up at me with one, I have no idea. And he goes, 20 years ago, I asked for Jesus. Instead, I got the devil. Okay, well, you know, folks, back then for me, Jesus, the devil, Sun Young Moon, Guru Maharaji, the Good Tooth Fairy, you know, it meant nothing to me. But that so creeped me out. When he said that to me, boing, I was gone. And I said, I got to get out of this place. And I had traveled enough to know you can't get away from yourself by traveling. But I said, I got to get out of here. And I end up leaving and I go to Paris. And I had been on, and for some, you know, I mean, again, I'm hurting from when the fight, and my knee and my back, and I just picked up a heaviness from that guy's apartment that I couldn't shake. And I'm in Paris, and for whatever reason, I'm alone, and I've been on the road since I was 17, and I'm used to being alone, and I never cared about alone. Everything, and I had personal issues, everything. My life was just going down, down, down. And it was the only time in my life, and I remember the exact spot where I was. And I was with my wife in Paris one time, and I said, this is where I was standing when I had these thoughts. And my life's going down, down, down. And I thought, okay, what are your options? This was the only time in my life something like this. I said, I could do A, I could do B, or I could kill myself. And I was standing near the Eiffel Tower, and I really thought, that's how I hurt my knee and back skydiving. And I thought, I'll just jump off the Eiffel Tower. And then it was amazing because the moment I had that thought, this other thought just kind of came right behind and boop, knocked that thought out. And the thought was, hang on, maybe this Jesus stuff is true. But then as soon as I had that thought, I can remember it so clearly. As soon as I had that thought, I cursed myself. I said, look at you. Your whole life you viewed religious people as weak people. Oh, they couldn't handle the hard knocks of life, so they have their Buddha statue or their invisible bunny rabbit or their Mary statue, and they pray, and they sing, and it makes them. I mean, it was like, for me, it was bleh. I thought it was the cheapest, weakest crutch. And I mean, I really had a lot of disdain for that. And then I thought, and now look at you. The first time in your miserable 23 years, you feel like you can't make it. And so you're going to reach out to some God in the sky or some big daddy in the sky to make yourself feel better? And I said, no way. I said, I'd rather be dead than live a lie, no matter how good the lie made me feel. I would have jumped off the Eiffel Tower. I wasn't going to believe, I was an honest seeker for truth. And I wasn't going to believe a lie no matter how good it made me feel. And I can remember but I remember this moment perfectly. Whether I shook a fist in the sky or not, I don't know. I said, okay, God, if you exist. I only found out later, Greeks seek for wisdom, Jews seek for a sign. I never knew anything. I never knew the Bible back then. But I said, all right, God, if you exist, if you're there, I need a sign. You need to reveal yourself to me. Otherwise, I will never believe ever. And with that, I left. Okay? And I go back to Israel because I need to get back. I had put over 2 years, almost 2.5 years in my novel now. And I want to go back to Israel. I'm going to go back to my old kibbutz and just pick up where I left off and just work on my novel because nothing matters but my book. Well, I get back to my old kibbutz and they won't let me back on, okay? They got rid of me. You're not coming back. Okay, fine, I'll find another kibbutz. And I told some of the Christians what happened. And in Paris, and I said, and this one guy said, well, if you asked, God will reveal himself to you. All right, fine, whatever, okay. I mean, I did mean it. Well, anyway, I decide I'm going to go to another kibbutz. Well, you just don't walk up to a kibbutz, walk up to the gate, I'm here. You got to go to an office. They're different, however. And I went to the main office in Tel Aviv. And I'm going to get assigned to another kibbutz. So I walk into the office. And there's a boy sitting in a desk, in a chair. And there's the woman at the desk. And I walk in and he's there to get assigned to a kibbutz. And I walk in and I look on the desk and there's a sheet of paper. And it has my name, Clifford Goldstein, on the sheet of paper. And the boy was there getting assigned to a kibbutz. And I said, excuse me, ma'am, how did you know I was coming? Who are you? Clifford Goldstein. And the boy there jumps up and says, no, that's mine. My name is Clifford Goldstein. Now, all right, now Clifford Goldstein's not the most common name in the world. But, we were in Tel Aviv, okay? And then I said, where are you from? And he says, I grew up in Miami Beach. And when I told my mother the story, she goes, oh, yeah. When you were a kid, his pediatrician bills used to come to the house. Okay? Well, he was there to get assigned to a kibbutz. And I said, Cliff, have I got the kibbutz for you? You go to my old kibbutz and tell him your name is Clifford Goldstein and you're from Miami Beach, and you'll see what happens, okay? So he goes. So I get assigned to another kibbutz, Ein Gev. Ein Gev. You know kibbutz Ein Gev? Yeah, okay. I worked in the fish restaurant there and so on. But I'm there a little while, and it's not working out. And I decide I need to go back to the States. So I go back to my old kibbutz for a visit. And they had the volunteers. At that time, there were maybe 30 different rooms for the volunteers on the kibbutz. And Clifford Goldstein was in the same room that I had been on when I was there. I had left months earlier. And not only was he in the same room, there were 2 beds in the room, and he was in the same bed I was in. So this couldn't have meant as much to him as it did to me, but still. And I'm sitting, we're just warming up, folks. This is the part where people start looking at me out of the corner of their eyes. My wife, the first time she heard the story, said, this guy can't be for real, okay? But anyway, I'm sitting at the head of the bed, the foot of the bed, he's at the head, and we're talking. This is a little bizarre. And I look up on the bookshelf over the bed where I had left all my books because I hitchhiked up to Copenhagen. So I couldn't take my books. You grab a book or two and you trade on the road, whatever. And I look up and I see a bunch of books on the shelf, and I see a number of my old books. And I said, hey, Cliff, you like my books? And he goes, what are you talking about? Those are all my books. And I said, no way. And I reach up and I pull the Sylvia Plath book off the shelf. Same author, same title, but my books look like kid crayons on them. He has same author, same title, same everything. Sylvia Plath, but it wasn't my book, it was his book. And I thought, only writers read this stuff. And I said, Cliff, are you a writer? And he says, yeah, I think I want to be a writer. Okay? And then, as we're talking, this girl walks into the room. I never saw her before. Guess what, folks? She's got blonde hair. She's from Denmark. And her name is Tina. Okay, this is exactly what happened. Well, I'll never forget. I go down to people who knew were kind of freaked out. I'll never forget this one guy. He's a Jewish believer who's part of this group of Christians. And he looks at me and he says, Cliff, you were asking God for signs. He goes, man, what more do you want? The Lord is calling you by name. Well, when he said that to me, I'm just sitting there. I asked, it couldn't be, I didn't, it was like, what happened was the first time in my life I looked up in the sky with a little bit of fear and a little bit of reverence, okay? Because I just, I didn't know it couldn't have been a coincidence, whatever. But anyway, the bottom line is these Christians whom I harangued and harassed the whole year, they take me down to the Jordan. I can't make this stuff up. They take me down to the Jordan River and they baptize me. Okay? They baptize me. And I don't know what it meant. And they give me a Bible, okay? And I go back home to the States, okay? I go back to Gainesville. Well, the only problem was I'm no more born again than a corpse, okay? Meeting my double was heavy. And I didn't know what to make of it, but I really wasn't born again. I didn't know God or whatever. But anyway, I'm back in Gainesville. I'm doing whatever I can to try to earn a living because all I want to do is write my novel. In the midst of all this, I'm writing my novel. Now, I need to backtrack a little. When I left that guy in Copenhagen, I go back to Israel, and I'm on Kibbutz Ein Gev, the other kibbutz I went to. And this is where the first time, I laid down one afternoon in my room to take a nap. And I felt this little tingling in my toes. And this rolling up, this rolling up to my body. And I felt this, my head was shaking. And I feel myself flying through this tunnel. I'm going through this tunnel, and I feel like my soul, back then I didn't know, was being torn from my body. And I'm going through, and there's this loud banging, and I sit up, and I go, man, what was that? And I come back to the States, and it keeps happening to me. I lay there in this sense of going through a tunnel, and it's noisy, and it's loud, and it's very uncomfortable, and it was just not. And each time I fight it, I sit up. And then I said to myself, look, next time this happens, don't fight it, okay? Don't see what happens. So sure enough, I lay down, this rolling up, this pounding in my head, this sense of going through a tunnel, and whoosh, I feel myself fly right out of my body. And I'm floating, I go right through the roof. I remember that. And the next thing I knew, I'm hovering in the air in this gray, crackly mist. I remember exactly where it was. Gray, crackly mist outside the second-story apartment of a couple of friends of mine who were into Guru Maharaji. And I'm in this mist, and I'm floating, and it's horrible. And the next thing I know, boom, I'm back in my body. Now, folks, before I go any further, I am a hardcore Seventh-day Adventist today. I know there's no such thing as a separate, conscious, immortal soul that exists. I know that now. But there's nothing anybody could have said that would have convinced me that that was anything other than my soul leaving my body. It was exactly like these near-death experiences. Okay? I mean, I've read a lot. It's the exact phenomena. I wasn't anywhere near dead. I believe it's all demonic hallucinations, okay, because they meet their dead relatives and so on. But at that time, I knew nothing about that. All I thought was, wow, maybe the occult, maybe spiritualism. This is where the truth is that I'm seeking. Because I didn't know anything about being born again. I didn't know Jesus. I knew nothing. I had the Bible, but they gave me the Bible, and I couldn't get past the talking snake spiel. I couldn't get past that. It's like, come on, you got to be for real here, okay? But the occult, I had the experience, okay? So I decided I'm going to study the occult. So I'm walking over the library at the University of Florida to get a book on the occult. Well, I'm a starving writer, but 2.5 years in my novel. All that matters is my novel. I need a job. Well, what will a man give in exchange for his soul? I walk by a health food store, with hated vegetarians, okay? I need a job. So I bang on the door, it was closed, and this guy comes out, and I tell him what I'm into. This time while we're talking about the occult, he goes, what? And he pulls me in the health food store, and he locks the door. And then he starts saying, this stuff is demonic. This is a deception. Well, Satan. Well, as I said, he might as well told me about Santa Claus than to talk to me about the devil. But he says, here, read this book. And he hands me a book. And I go, fine, I'm a writer. I read everything. So I take the book, and I go over to the library at the University of Florida. I'm not in school, so I can't check anything out, but I find this book on the cult, on spiritualism, and I can still remember it so clearly. I remember just exact spot where I was sitting. I sat there, I read the first chapter and practiced the first technique. It said something, stare at a spot in the back of your head, whatever. So I'm done staring at a spot in the back of my head, and I'm going to go put the book back on the shelf. Well, to make a long story short, literally, in one hand, for the first time in my life, I got this book on the occult and spiritualism. And literally, in my other hand, for the first time in my life, I have the book the guy handed me in the health food store. Cult book in one hand. What do you think the only other book could have been? The Great Controversy. Okay? And I'm telling you, folks, I was clueless. I was as clueless as you could possibly be about anything that was going on, okay? And I started actually reading Great Controversy, and I was enjoying it. I mean, I got it to the part, I'm not as enamored of Martin Luther as Ellen White is, okay? But I know the Lord used him, whatever, but I just read a little bit. Well, about 2 nights later, I'm walking back to my room to work on my novel. I've been working 2.5 years on the book. Nothing else mattered to me. I was ready to put another 2.5 years. It didn't matter. All that mattered was my book. If you asked me at that point, did I believe in God? Did I believe in Jesus? Well, I wasn't hostile to Jesus anymore. I had been baptized. And between having these, whatever you could say, those occult experiences helped open me up to a wider reality than what I had been taught as a secular worldview. So I was open to the reality of a spiritual realm. I didn't know what spirit that was, but at that point I was open. But did I believe? Well, I knew there was something out there, but beyond that, nothing. All that mattered was my book. And I go back to my room, and the sun is setting. And I have a manual typewriter, okay? Now, some people wonder, well, wasn't your book in the cloud? Okay, we're dealing with manual typewriter. And I sit down to write. And don't ask me why I did this. But for some reason, I closed my eyes and I uttered a little prayer. I don't know who I prayed to. I don't know what I prayed. But the devil had me. I was having I forgot. And this is the part that totally freaks me out. After I had that first total out-of-body experience, I started writing about it. In other words, I weaved it into my novel. I didn't know where I was going to go with it, but I just started to write. So, I was having occult experiences. I was writing about it, and I was reading about it. The devil had me. But I go back, an Adventist theologian named John Peckham talked about the rules of engagement. And somehow, I just closed my eyes and prayed, maybe 3 seconds, And that was all the Lord needed. At that moment, the presence of the Lord Jesus Christ came to me in the room. I knew at that instant, I knew exactly who it was never a question. I knew exactly who he was, and I knew exactly what he wanted. And the exact words were, Cliff, you have been playing with me long enough. If, I can't tell you how important that if is, free will baby all the way here. If you want me tonight, burn your novel. I mean, it showed me in an instant, that was my God. That was my God. I mean, you shall have no other gods before me. I didn't know that Bible text. I didn't know nothing about the Bible. I couldn't tell you if the Old Testament from the New Testament. Okay, I knew nothing. But at that moment, I knew instantly what the issue was. And I said, God, please let me finish the book, and then I'll give my life to you. If you want me tonight, burn the novel. Please, God, I'll write it all to your glory. If you want me tonight, burn the novel. God, please let me finish it. And then I'll go, if you want me, burn the book. I mean, there were two things that were overwhelming to me in the room. I can't stress the sense of free will. I look back, I shudder. I shudder because I could have so easily gone the other way. And the other thing, too, at the time, I look back now, because I would have been doing for the occult what I do in Adventism had I not done it. But I had this sense, if I don't do this now, I'll never have a chance again. And anyway, I just jumped up out of the room, burst into tears, and ran out of the room. And I was walking through the streets of Gainesville. These are the same streets that I walked through when 3 years earlier, after the pizza parlor, and I said, God, I want truth. I wanted truth no matter the cost. And now I'm confronted with the cost. I can't do it. I can't. I could have slit my throat easier than I could have burned that novel. And I'm just walking through the streets, and all this stuff is going on. And then finally, I just remember the moment. Oh, my goodness. This is 1979. I'm standing underneath the street lamp. And what I remember, it's at night, and the bugs are flying around the lamp and casting their shadows on the ground. And I said, okay, God, I surrender. I want you, I want truth more than I want this novel. If you want it burned, you're going to have to burn it for me. And even though God didn't force, I did sort of feel this grip around my neck. And I'm telling you, it was the moment I made that choice. I mean, the moment, it was amazing. The moment I made that choice, everything lifted off me. Everything. And I knew what I was going to do. And I didn't have a qualm. I didn't have a doubt. I walked back to my room, picked up the manuscript. 2.5 years, I'm 23 years old, 2.5 years of your life. And I had this little 2-burner hot plate that my mother had given me in vain hope that I'd cook something. And even to this day, my wife leaves me food. You mean I got to put it in the microwave? I don't want to do that. Well, then eat it cold. Eat it cold. I don't care. So I had this hot plate. And again, I had if you told me I was a sinner, I would have no idea what you were talking about. I knew nothing. All I knew is I met God. I knew I was born again, even though I didn't know what it meant. Okay? And I picked up that manuscript, 2.5 years, turned the knob, and burned the novel. And that was the night I was born again. That I gave my heart to the Lord. Anyway, had you told me, I mean, again, I had no idea. I knew nothing. All I knew is I met God. I burned that novel that night. And that was the night I was born again. And then again, those occult experiences. See, Satan had me, but he overplayed his hand on me. When I know the Bible talks about principalities and powers and occult stuff, folks, believe me, I know, okay? But when I gave my heart to Christ, those occult experiences never came back. Greater is he that is in you than he. It was his last-ditch effort, and I came so close. I mean, it was, I shudder to think and how powerful the deception was. Well, that pastor, that preacher I used to harass, he comes back to Gainesville. And I get in the center of the circle with him. And he figures, here we go again. Only this time I witnessed with him to students, and they remembered me as Heckle. Okay? Well, anyway, the people in the health food store were obviously Adventists. And I started studying with them. And when I burned, okay. Oh, you're not going to believe this. I'm in the health, I'm studying with it takes me about 8 months from the time I burned the novel till the time I became an Adventist. I told you, the Adventists were nice, but man, they were some strange people. Okay? I was like, this is too much, man. But I'm studying with them, and about 2 months, I left Israel about 2 months earlier. I'm just telling you what happened, folks. I'm standing in front of a health food store, and I'm getting ready to cross the street, and a car drives by. And I think I'll wait instead of running. So I wait till the car drives by. And who do you think is in the car? Clifford Goldstein. Okay, and the car, they pull over, and I know God did this for him. And he said, Cliff, I got to admit, this is incredible. Okay, now the funny thing is, I found him online. I found him online about 5 years ago. He lives in Santa Barbara, okay, but he won't have anything to do with me. He won't take my friend requests. I am him. I think he's scared. I think he's scared. And I said to my wife, I used to say, I'm 99% sure it was him. But then I said, no, I'm 100% sure now. Because if it weren't him, he would email me, hey, man, I'm not the guy, leave me alone. But the fact that but I haven't forgot about him. I believe the Lord, I didn't need it anymore. I think God did that for him. But anyway, it is funny too. There's another, there's another Clifford Goldstein. He's much younger, okay? Get this, he's a gynecologist, okay? All right, so, and a couple times a year or whatever, his patients get my Gmail account confused with his. And Dr. Goldstein, my IUD isn't fitting right. What do I do? Oh, Dr. Goldstein, the most intimate female things. And I had fun in the beginning with it. But now I'm very careful and very sensitive. And, and so on. I mean, I got some funny ones. And I would tell you how funny my responses are. But I look back now, I'm not proud of that. I shouldn't have done that. But anyway, okay, the bottom line is, okay, I got to wrap this up. I burned that novel. I realized I might never write again. I died to it. I had no idea what I was going to do. I have no skills in anything else but writing. I have no interest in anything else but writing. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I just said, well, whatever. It's what it took. And then one day, about 2 years later, the door opened for me to write an article. And I wrote the article, and it got published. And you'll never guess what the topic was on. The health benefits of vegetarianism. And the point is, I wrote that article, and all I've been doing is writing since. The Lord gave it back. So I think if there's a message here, it's like every now and then I go to this bookstore downtown, and I walk into the novel. I'm looking at it now from the other end of my life. I turned 70 in about a week. And I walk into the bookstore, and I look in the section. And even if I had my books there, even if they were in the literature, what are the odds of that? It means so little. And looking at it from this side now, and I just thank God. I could have lost my soul for what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? And, I see it now and I shudder to think what I could have lost for that. Because in the end, the Hevel, Kol Hevelim. They know that. Hevel, Hevelim. Yeah. Kol Hevelim. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. And the Hebrew word hevel, is it a hey or a het? Hey, hevel. Yeah, I always get that. Hevel. It means vapor. It means breath. And it's just so fleeting and so transient. Anyway, here I am, and that's the story. So I know it's like, whoosh. And I said, my first time my wife heard that, she thought, this guy can't be for real. But she's been hearing it now for decades. And I met her not long after real quick, and then we could go to the question and answer thing. I met my wife, this is funny, not long after I got to the GC. And I spent time in very conservative Adventism. Okay, I spent 2 years at a place called Wildwood, real conservative Adventism. And I get to the GC, and I'm 28 years old. I went there after 4 years in the church, which is a whole other story. I wrote a book. If you have any interest, I got a book out called An Adventist Journey. You can get it on Amazon or whatever. It just tells my whole spiritual, theological journey in Adventism. But I'm looking for a wife. I don't want to waste time, I don't need a girlfriend. I'm 28, and they pressure you when you work for the church to get married, okay? So, well, anyway, I'm at this party that some girl from the GC had, and this girl walks in, Kim, and I had seen her because I had given my testimony, and she walks in. I'm somebody. I don't have if you don't interest me, I zone out, okay? I saw a guy because I telecommute from the GC now. So the guy said, yeah, we miss you, Cliff, walking around the building talking to yourself, So I must have been bored at the party, and I had these headphones on. And I'm sitting there eating a piece of cake. And she thought, who in the world sits at a party with headphones on? And she goes, well, this should be interesting. So she sits down next to me, and I see this pretty girl, and I don't want to waste any time. So I take my headphones off, and my opening line to her is, so, are you another one of these liberal Adventists? That was my opening. And it must have worked because 6 months later we were married. Okay, and now we're going on 40 years, in November. So anyway, but that's a whole other. If you're I wrote this book, An Adventist Journey. You could see why I am so utterly convinced of Adventism. I said before, I have to be here. I want the truth no matter what, and I mean everything that happened. But anyway, okay. Well, look, they had some time. What is the time element here? You got some questions? If you got to go, go. If you got some questions and answers. I didn't know we're online. I'm going to be a little more careful. Okay. Yeah, I should. Okay, go ahead. Or give her the mic or something. You speak, because I'm deaf. I got hearing aids, but they don't work. And my wife drove me crazy to get hearing aids. But you know what I like about them? Again, I could play my iPhone through the hearing aids. So people don't know. I'm bored. I do it. I should say I do it in church. I shouldn't say that, but the hearing, so that's the one thing I like about my hearing aids. I don't know if they help me hear any better, but they sure help me block out things when I'm not interested. I know that's, okay. Yeah. I'm going to get a little water here.
Is it on? Yeah, there it goes. I was just curious about the end of the story. You said you asked your wife if she was a liberal Adventist. Can you tell us what she answered?
Well, she looked at me. She had this, no. And she was like, just incredulous that I said that to her. She was aghast that I said that to her. And she turned out she wasn't. She was, it was great. We very harmonized like that. Because I loosened up. I came out of, you mellow with age, man. I look back, when I first got to the GC, in fact, Bill Johnson had been the editor of the Review then, and Bill had been like a father to me. And we joked one time, I said, Bill, you remember what I was like when I first got to the GC? And Bill was always very gracious. He would smile, he would lower his eyes, and he'd politely change the conversation. But yeah, you mellow out with age. You mellow out, and it's like, My wife we're so opposite. She's a perfect balance for me. She really is the perfect balance for me. So I shudder to think. I mean, we say now, if I died, I said, you'd be fine. You'd be fine. I mean, me, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to use a washing machine. So it's like, I don't know how, she knows I couldn't survive. I mean, she'd be fine. I would be, I don't know what I would do anyway. All right, go ahead.
I would like to know what to say to one of my sons. That when my husband and I divorced, he came to Adventism through me, because I'm a third-generation Adventist.
I bring the mic up closer, speak a little louder.
Anyway, my husband came through Adventism with me because I'm a third-generation Adventist. But then he left Adventism. And so we divorced. And anyway, through a long sequence of events, they bankrupted me, and I had to move away. Well, when I came back, and when my husband died, they had pulled the kids into Judaism. His family. My kids who were raised in this church.
Yeah. Oh, that's fairly common.
Is it? Well, anyway, so I asked my son Karsten finally told me this. And I said, well, Karsten, I understand what you're telling me, but what do you do with your sin?
Yeah. Well,
and he looked at me, and it kind of, I could tell it shocked him. And he said, well, that's what the Day of Atonement's for. And I said, you think you can get rid of all your sin with one day? And then again, he was dumbfounded. And then he didn't talk to me for 3 weeks. And he just now called the other day and said, "I'm sorry, Mom, that I haven't talked to you." And I said, "Well, we'll have to get together and talk some more." And he said, "Yeah, we will." But I'm not quite sure how to follow that up. Except, I said, you need Jesus, Karsten. There is no other way.
I've had, over the decades, I've had Adventists come to me with spouses or mostly children who leave Adventism, and they either become Messianic Jews, so they still believe in Jesus, or they convert just to Judaism in general. And, again, it's so hard to know. It's almost like they don't want to give up the Sabbath. They can give up Jesus, but the Sabbath gets so ingrained in them, they can't. Was it Orthodox Judaism, conservative, Reform, do you know? Okay, give her the mic again, yeah.
Well, it wasn't messianic because
Yeah.
he tried to tell me Jesus was a nice guy. And I said, "Nice guy? You've
Yeah.
got to be kidding."
Okay, yeah. But see, sometimes if they convert to like Reform Judaism, well, some of them you wonder if they even believe in God. And then you get to the Orthodox, and that's a whole different. But just love them, pray for them, and maybe at some point he's going to see you need more. You need more. So anyway, okay, go ahead. All right, well, go ahead right here. I don't know what the order is. All right, go ahead.
I just wanted to say you're truly a breath of fresh air. My perception of the GC is that there is absolutely not an ounce of humor in the GC, and you have very successfully changed my perception. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I was at a camp meeting in Australia last year, and some guy said, "Man, I had no idea the GC was like that." So, but anyway, I guess that's good.
I guess the question is, and I should start it by saying there's a very forgettable movie called The Pink Cadillac where Clint Eastwood his character says, "If we killed all the Jews, who would do stand-up comedy?" So my question is, what is there in the DNA of Jews that there's this innate sense of humor?
I think we got to laugh, considering everything that happened. If we didn't laugh and have a sense of humor, it'd almost be overwhelming. But yeah, I don't know. I don't try to be funny. I just do what I do. I am what I am.
You're very successful at it. Thank you.
Yeah. And it's funny. I'm not very good. I can't hide. I'm not very good at hiding my feelings. I just sort of. Well, whatever. Anyway, I guess you meant that nicely. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Hi. Hello. Okay, you hear me? Okay. I really enjoyed your sermon this morning. It clarified a lot of my questions. But there is an article you wrote at Adventist Review back in 2023 in December 8th, and I just wonder if you can clarify this.
I wrote it?
Yes.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so if I can read a portion of it, because there was a statement that I had a lot of questions about. It says, "I've always been baffled by those among us. I've always been baffled among those among us who deny the penal substitutionary aspect of Christ's death."
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, the one that got Tim Jennings having hissy fits over.
Yeah, and so
yeah.
The last one is, in short, rather than killing us for violating his law, the Father killed Jesus instead. Could you please
but I said it's crudely put.
It was crudely put.
But I did that on purpose. But that's what I believe. I mean, what do? Look at sin. Look at what sin has done. Okay? And see, there's the whole legal element. See, Tim doesn't want to believe in the legal element. Oh, let's just become. In other words, The far right, you want to solve the problem of sin. It's easy. Just stop sinning.
Well, there really is no consequence.
Tim's view is, you want to solve the problem of sin, just become friends with God and love God, and the sin goes away.
That's not true.
Okay, well, it's sort of.
Not true.
Kind of, but anyway.
Not true.
But oh yeah, I don't want to get in a whole...
I'm not doing it. I just want to know where you're coming from because...
Well, yeah, I believe in legal, penal, substitutionary...
Okay, then I know where you're coming from. Because sin doesn't really have a consequence. It's what God will do to us at the end.
Put the mic up, yeah. Put it to your mouth.
No, you mean sin doesn't really have a consequence. It's what God will do to us because of sin, not because sin is a consequence.
Well, again, I did that on purpose. I wrote that article knowing it was gonna... Well, what happened was I got on his website. And when I first got on the website, I thought he was mocking Graham Maxwell. I thought it was a spoof because it was Graham Maxwell on steroids. And I thought he was I mean, come on, friend, are you going to take it serious? The flood was divine therapy? That's what he said, the flood. So I said, what's that, hydrotherapy? And what was Sodom and Gomorrah? Fever therapy? I mean, come on, he takes stuff, look, I had a lot of problems with Maxwell. But man, Maxwell was kosher compared to Tim. And I saw Tim at the GC session. We had a nice personal he's the only guy I know that could out-talk me, okay? And I like him on a personal level, but that's not Christianity, his theology. But I don't want to debate that now. I'm in Southern California. You know, this is where this stuff was brewed. For 40 years it was taught by Graham Maxwell, and it still has infiltrated, but it has always been deemed a heresy anywhere it's been taught, and it is not what Seventh-day Adventists teach. It's not in our fundamental beliefs. He takes a beautiful truth and pushes it to a ludicrous extreme. But anyway, that's me. I don't want to debate that here. We don't, no sense getting that in here. Obviously, I haven't convinced you, but anyway, that is... Anyway, I don't want to... Yeah, but I wrote that way on purpose. And Tim has been using that to rail against me ever since. But we had a very nice discussion at the GC session at his booth before they threw him out. You know, they threw him out. And he blames me for it, and I really didn't do it. I really didn't get him thrown out. I didn't think he should have been there, but I didn't have anything to do with them throwing him out. But that's a whole other... I don't sense getting into that, you know. I love you, brother, and I know you're sincere, but I do think the gospel... What I believe happened is every error that I have seen in the Adventist church is an imbalance of truth. Okay, you got some wacky prophetic stuff that's just kook stuff. But almost every atoning error, whatever, in the church, they get an element of truth that's beautiful. There's beautiful stuff in the subjective aspect of the gospel. And we fall in love with Jesus because of what he did, and we have a relationship with him, and we love him, and we want to follow him, and we follow God because we love him. But I love him because he bore the legal penal substitution for my sins. And that's the unfortunate part that tends to be left out. And I'm sorry, you leave that out, you've got nothing, in my opinion. Anyway, let's move on.
Well, thank you for clarifying that.
What's that?
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, that's all, you know.
I mean, I respectfully disagree in some aspect, but that's okay.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
But the point is what instructional value for me to be tortured if I'm already lost, if Christ is going to...
Yeah, all right, anyway, okay, cool. All right, go ahead.
But again, according to what you were saying this morning, and to clarify on my thought, we stand in the judgment righteous because it's Christ that's being judged, not us. He stands in our place.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Because again, who of you, do any of you think you could stand in the judgment? Yeah, on your own, you know? Yeah, so that's why I don't, because look, I know people that would cut my throat over this sermon this morning. There, oh, I know that you got a wing of Adventism out there that, believe me, you know, it's so funny. Decades ago, I was in Portugal, and I remember, this could have been 26 years ago, and I preached a similar sermon, and I'll never forget these two young Turks. These boys are walking up after the sermon, and they got fire in their eyes. And I knew exactly what I was going to face. And I remember thinking to myself, Cliff, don't fight these boys. Minister to them, okay? And they came up to me because I recognized some of the young me in them. And that could have been me, though I might have not gone up to some GC guy like they did and told me I'm going to hell because of what I preached. But they came up and they told me, you're going to go to hell for what you preached. And I said, son, guys, if I'm wrong about what I preached, I'm going to go to hell for a whole lot of other things long before my bad theology puts me there. You know, so again, I don't know, but again, I don't know what they think. You know, I mean, let's just, even if you were perfect at the end time, what about all your past? You know, I mean, we have to have the atoning Jesus covering us. And, you know, I love Ellen White said that the cross was an infinite gift. And I just preached a sermon. When I heard that, it just got me, wow. And I preached a sermon. I wrote this new sermon and preached it in my home church about a month and a half ago. And I just said, okay, we're finite. And if to put it crudely, we're only going to commit a finite number of sins, okay? And if we got an infinite, you see what I'm saying? We have an infinite gift. If you want to look at it, it's a little crude way to look at it, but if you want to look at it that way, an infinite gift is going to be more than enough to cover finite sins. And I found that thought helpful. Okay, David, my brother, go ahead.
Hey, Cliff. Hey, everyone. Happy Sabbath. So I really enjoyed your sermon this morning.
Put it up to your mic again. I really.
Sorry.
I am going. It's terrible.
It's okay.
The joys of getting old.
So I really enjoyed your sermon this morning, mainly because you really focus on the words from the Bible and you take all of your reasoning from the scriptures. And also since you are an editor and a writer for most of your life, so you know what is the heavy weight of each word that's written in the Bible. And one of your points, you mentioned the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, and also you mentioned Chukat Olam, which is...
Chukat Olam, yeah.
Yes.
Who says it for real Israeli, go ahead.
So basically Chukat Olam means the law forever, and Olam is really forever, it doesn't have an ending to it. And that also made me think about the other terminology that's written in the Bible regarding the feasts, which are, when God mentioned, there are my appointed times, and he also refers to them as my Sabbaths. So basically, with all that being said, and you know, as being an editor, you know that every single word it has a very powerful meaning to it. What are your thoughts about keeping the feasts and the appointed times?
You know, it's so funny. I'm writing an article. I'm writing something for somebody right now on that. And, you know, first of all, I know there are Adventists that think we should do it. And I just say this. We're a church that has struggled with legalism from day one, okay? We have struggled with legalism, and somehow I think the last thing the Adventist church needs is something that you could be more legalistic over, okay? Now, and I personally, it's funny, I'm just dealing with it right now. You know, you don't have a temple, all right, Jesus is our temple. You don't have the sacrifices, Jesus is our sacrifice. We're separated from the land. Well, there's neither Jew nor Greek. You know, so there's answer for all that in Jesus, but to me, those seem to be the reasons why we don't need to keep the feasts anymore. It was founded. I personally, I don't have a problem if people want to keep the feast. But even let's just face it though, nobody, even the most Orthodox Jews in Israel, they're not keeping the biblical Levitical feasts. They can't. They're not doing sacrifices. They're not at the temple. You know, there's just a number of things that you just can't do anymore. So I have no problem. I have no doubt that people who keep the feasts can get a spiritual blessing from them. And I am not opposed. You know, there's some people think you keep the feast, you're falling into the Galatians heresy and all that, and I don't buy into that. I mean, there might be some people. Oh, look, I have some neighbors across the street, Gentiles, okay? And they moved to the area because there's a place called Jacob's Tent. It's like a Messianic synagogue in Cleveland, Tennessee. And they keep Shabbat, and they keep all the feasts, and they're all into the Jewish stuff. And it's funny, though, because probably 95% of them are not Jewish. And yet they're all, if I go there and visit, you know, a lot of people, they can't places, they don't like Jews. But this place with the name Goldstein, it's like, wow, that name was, you know. But I understand the lure of it. And if people want to do it as just a means to help them better because you could find the gospel in the different stages of it. It's there. There's no question. It's all there. But I worry about Adventists because we tend to be so legalistic anyway. You know, I'll never forget one time. I gave morning worship at the GC. Oh my goodness, this could have been 25 years ago. And I wanted to start out with a joke. And I know these people, you know, they know. And I just said, you know, I've been an Adventist now, 15, 20 years or whatever. And I said, folks, you know, I think I'm finally really starting to catch on what it means to be an Adventist. And I said, it's because I'm starting to doubt my salvation. And I thought that was funny. But whoa, man, it was like dead silence. I mean, I never cracked a joke in public that bombed like that bomb. And I thought, man, people really struggle with this, okay? And I still say the whole problem comes from half a dozen Ellen White quotes taken out of the full context of everything she said. I told you, string these 6 Ellen White quotes together without the whole context of everything she said. I said before, you know you're losing your soul. But you look at like the stuff I read this morning, she has a beautiful, balanced concept of the gospel. So, I forgot, how did I get on that topic anyway? How did we get there? Oh, yeah, the feast and legalism. Yeah, okay, yeah. Sorry. Anyway, go ahead. You know, I'm all right. I mean, I'm fine. I usually am in bed in about 15 minutes, Mike. Seriously. I go to bed at 7 and get up at 3. So California kills me. But I'm good. Anyway, go ahead. Somebody else?
I have a question. Wow.
Go ahead. Good. You're nice and loud. That's what I need.
That's good. That's good. I have to agree with my brother here. You know, my opinion of the GC is that there's no comedy anywhere in that place. Okay. There's no what? There's no comedy. There's no joking. Yeah. Yes, I've been there. I've been there. My question is, and listening to your story and everything, how in the world did they let you through the front door?
The GC, and I don't have to, I'm not playing politics. I just have to be voted in next month, okay? So, but it has been a wonderful experience there. I mean, I've had a wonderful experience in the Adventist church. I really have. And I've been at the GC going on, I'm at 41 years now. And you know what it is? I think the bottom line is they know I'm loyal. I'm loyal. I mean, I believe this stuff. I mean, it was providential how I got there. And they know me. They know me. I mean, they're not going to make me a VP. You know, they're not gonna put me out in front in the public face of Adventism to the world. They you know, but they know what I could do. They know what I don't do. And, you know, I say this, I told this to some people earlier. I was in the church 4 years when I got to the GC. Okay, that's a whole other long spiel, but if you get my book, Adventist Journey, it explains. And I remember when I first got to the GC, I had two overwhelming thoughts. My first thought was, wow, I'm at the GC, wow. And the second thought was, what a privilege to be here. Well, the wow, I'm at the GC, I probably lost that 35 years ago, okay? But I've never lost the sense of the privilege to be here, that it's a privilege I don't deserve. It's through the grace of God. And I told some earlier, this fella named Dan Jackson, and Dan became the North American Division President, I don't remember, 15, 20, whatever it was. And I remember when Dan came into the building, and I thought about it later, it was a lot of chutzpah to say this to the NAD president. But he walked in the building, and I said, Dan, you got to remember, you don't own the pencil on your desk. You're just a steward here. And the day you think you deserve this is the day you just, you know, you don't deserve to be here. And he took it very well because I think he understood that. So I don't take my job for granted. It's a privilege. I take my work very seriously. And whatever my faults or flaws, I'm loyal. I'm almost loyal to a fault to the church and to the GC. You know, you could go too far. But my wife sometimes, I mean, I had been in a running battle with Ted Wilson over something for 10 years. And in the end, I lost. You know, I lost. I mean, I can't beat, you know. But at one point, I said, Ted, I just want you to know, Ted, I'm a company man. And I'll do what you tell me to do. And my wife, who's not quite that way, she goes, you really are a company man, aren't you? But yeah, I'm very loyal to the GC, and but I just believe in the Adventist church, whatever the faults, the weaknesses. Look, I'll tell you, once you accept Christianity, okay, and again, I might as well plug another book. I wrote a book a few years ago called Risen, Finding Hope in the Empty Tomb. Yes. And here's the funny thing. I hadn't doubted the resurrection since I've been an Adventist. And I just thought, I did research on the resurrection. And when I finished this book, I said to my wife, and I've written 26 books. Most of them flopped. Most of them are out of print. This will probably flop and be out of print too, but whatever, I don't care. I just do it, whatever. And I said, of all the books I've written, I was amazed at how much this book impacted my faith positively. I mean, the evidence for the resurrection, I mean, I was shocked at how much. So once you have the resurrection, you've got Christianity. And here's one of the reasons why I have to be if you're not going to give up the Sabbath, you've wiped out what? 99% of your options, probably 99.5% of your options, okay? So you got 0.5% left, okay? And if you're not going to give up the state of the dead for this immortal soul, they got Charlie Kirk in heaven already, whatever. If you're not going to give up the state of the dead for this pagan, pure platonic pagan nonsense, you've wiped out 99.5% of the 0.5% left. So it's like God had made it easy. Once you understand it's not like you got all these parallel churches with you got some people that understand the state of the dead. You got some, in many ways, I had an article in the Review years ago. Caused quite a furor in the building, okay? But it was like, I had some very liberal people, the liberals were upset. But I said, if I could really do what I wanted to do, I wouldn't be an Adventist. I'd rather be a Messianic Jew. I don't want to, they sing a bunch of songs by a bunch of dead white European males. These hymns by a bunch of anti-Semitic slave owners, and all this Christian, a lot of, the cross is a pagan symbol, and all this stuff. I'd much rather be a Messianic Jew. But I can't. They're first of all, most of them, some of them are Sabbath keepers, but they're all caught up in the Israel and prophecy, eternal torment in hell. I was on this morning a website of a Messianic Jewish group, eternal torment in hell, the covenant promises are going to be fulfilled, they don't understand them, all that stuff. I have no choice. I have to be an Adventist. Amen. So anyway. Okay, go ahead, Victor.
Clifford, Pastor Clifford.
Yeah.
It's been a joy having you in our church.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Now, I have known you
Yeah.
and I have worked with you for probably 2.5, 3 decades. And I just want to thank you for what you have done, not only for the church, but for each one of us as we teach Sabbath school, or we talk about liberty, the liberty that we need.
Well, thank you.
Clifford, your writings are a blessing.
Well, thank you. Praise
And
the
for
Lord.
as long as God gives you the ability to write, please do so.
Oh, yeah.
Your humor is humane and godly divine. So, Pastor Clifford,
Well, thanks
stay
very
the
kind of
course.
you. Yeah. Well,
Thank
yeah, it's like I got to get reappointed. And I think they will. I think they will. I like to say, well, if I don't get reappointed, I'd like to think I take it gracefully. I won't, but I'll get over it. I'll get over it. But I have been praying. I turned 70, and I feel it. Believe me, I feel it. And I'm not, I told them before, when I was 28 when I got to the GC. And I'd see these old goats in their 60s, pushing 70 and still working. And I think, come on, retire already. Well, now I'm one of the old goats, and I'm not ready to go yet, So I'm thinking if my health holds out, I say 2028, but I probably won't wanna. I'll probably want to hang on till 2030. And in fact, I told one of the ladies in the office, at 2030, I'm probably going to want to stay on again. And I hope at that point they throw me out. Okay, at that point they're going to have to throw me out. But as long as I do take it seriously, and I do mean it is a privilege. And well, you heard me tell my story. I wanted, and over the decades, things have hit me over my conversion that took me decades. In fact, something hit me a month ago, and I wrote it up in a review column. It'll be out. I've had a column in the Adventist Review for 28 years. I'm not going to ask how many of you read it because almost nobody does. And I get so discouraged, I don't even want to know. But I've had this column. But I put it in there. And this just hit me. It hit me at GC session. In that pizza parlor, what was the doctrine? What was the doctrine that changed my life? Think about what I said. I knew something, the cosmos was here. Something, it had to have an extra. What doctrine is that? It's so obvious. What is it? It's creation. It was the doctrine of creation. It's suddenly the truth of creation. That, if you think about it, what other doctrine could that have been? And then what other church would it have led me to? If the doctrine that made me realize that truth had to, it was a doctrine of creation, though. As I said, it took me 45 years till that finally hit me. It was a doctrine of creation that made me know that truth had to exist. And what other churches got the very name, Seventh Day, pointing back to the doctrine of creation? So anyway, but that was very nice of you, Victor. We try. I love what I do, though I do joke, whoever takes my place, I hope that poor schnook doesn't have to have one of these jobs where you got to be patted on the back and told how much good job you're doing, because that's not what you get in the Sabbath School Quarterly. That's not what you get in the Sabbath School Quarterly, because you only usually hear when people are mad. Go ahead. So, yeah.
Well, my question, and I've thought about it since I knew you were coming. Our Sabbath School group, I noticed you came in for a few minutes this morning. At COVID, we started live streaming out of desperation, and it's stuck.
Yeah.
And through this, every single lesson has been a blessing.
Well,
every single quarter has been a blessing. And I just want to know, how do you decide what the topic is going to be for Sabbath School?
Get me started on that. Don't get me started. Well, yeah, it's a long, there's a policy, and there's committees, but it never works. It never works out, and but it is amazing, though, some of the timing. When I make an assignment, how long do you think it is from the time I make an assignment? I'm the one that has to assign the Sabbath School authors. I did last week. I emailed somebody. I don't know where he's from. I have no idea where he's from. I just emailed him. I don't know if he's in Latin America. Maybe he's in the Philippines. I don't know. He just was recommended to me, and he said he'd do it. Now, whether he will or not, that's the joy of you give him. But anyway, when do you think that man's quarterly is? I gave him the assignment a week ago. When do you think the quarterly will be out? 5 years. It's 5 years from the time, because we give the authors 2 years, and I can't tell you how joyous it is when you give an author time and they want an extension, and you've given them extension, and then they never send you anything. I can't tell you how much fun that is and how much pressure that puts on me when that happens. And that does happen. I had one guy, he was a guy in the building. You'd have to shoot me and I wouldn't say the name. He comes to me. He wants to do a quarterly. Okay? I said, you know, he's well known and he's talented. And we go down to his office and we pick a topic that he would like. And I thought, all right, I'm not supposed to do this, but I could shuffle the timing. I'm supposed to get it approved by a committee. I shouldn't say this here, but anyway. So he asked for, he picked that, he came to me. And he asked for an extension, and I give him the extension, and I never got the quarterly. I never heard anything. And I'm over it now. I see him. We're friends. I think he was a little sheepish around me for a long time. But now I've actually had 5 people in the building do that to me. You know, 5. But, you know, look, people, they mean well, but not everybody's a writer. And sometimes it can be overwhelming. It's not that easy. You got to move, and so that's just part of the job. But I hope whoever comes in, I'll try to explain to them a few things. Because, when I first got in, I had it all in my mind. We're going to have everything work like an algebra problem, a geometry. This topic, this quarter, and then fitting right into that will be this next quarter, and then fitting right into that, each one will build, like a mathematical, logical whole, I got disabused of that real fast, okay? Because it's just the nature of the fallen world that we live in. But no, that's very kind to hear, because a lot of times I get, as I said, it's just not a job you can be if you got to be patted on the back and affirmed on. You don't usually. I mean, I'm accused of being a Jesuit infiltrator. There's one guy who calls us up for, we won't talk to him anymore, from Miami. And he harangues my staff no end. And finally I said, don't talk to him. So finally I talked to him. And he just, and we make mistakes. I joke, the brethren make a mistake, they get a committee, whatever, they can smooth it over, fine. My mistakes are in 128 languages, okay? And it's, so this guy calls me up, and he's all the error in the quarterly. Every quarterly has error after error. And he goes on for 15 minutes, and finally, I just said, brother, how stupid do you think the GC leadership is? I mean, really, do you honestly think they would let some, error after error after error, things slip through? And oh man, I've been editing it 26 years. And every now and then, there's been just a disaster. And it all lands on me. And it's rough. I mean, if that happened to me all the time, I couldn't stay in there. I mean, they'd probably throw me out, but just the stress and so on. But my boss one time, VP, said, it's amazing how little problems we've had. I mean, there's always things that slip through, and they're always, it can be expressed better. And I find 90% of the time, when they complain, I'll get in touch with them. I'll thank them. I'll say, yeah, I could see your point. Maybe we could have done this better, pray, and I mean it. And most of the time, they're okay. Sometimes if you just be nice to them and, you call and they're fine. I had one woman one time call me up accusing me of something with, the name of God, one of the name of God people stuff. And I said, ma'am, I'm fluent in biblical Hebrew. I've got the name right in front of me. Well, you're going to lose your soul too, and hangs up on me. Oh yeah, and then, the Jesuit stuff. I still get the Jesuit stuff. I said, do you think I might have been a Roman Catholic first before I became a Jesuit? But it's
Since Bakioki passed away,
oh yeah, Baki. Well, you know what happened? I know where the Jesuit stuff came from. I used to edit Liberty magazine. And this was back in the 90s, and I got so sick and tired of these right-wingers. Everybody's a Jesuit, okay? So finally I asked my boss, his name was Bob Dale, and I said, Bob, look, we used to have an insert that we put in the Adventist Review on religious liberty. And I said, Bob, I want to offer on a reward, a $2,000 reward for anybody who could prove that there's a Jesuit infiltrator in the church. And, I was doing it more as a joke than anything else. And he let me do it. So when we put this thing in the review, and, it was half just to try to show how idiotic this is. And we put it in. Well, I got all these letters, hilarious. And I published all the letters. Just, it was ludicrous stuff. One guy found 6 references to sun worship in the hymnals or whatever, so that proved there were 6 Jesuit infiltrators. We could make the check out to him here, and on and on and on. And I said, you watch. After this, I'll be accused of being a Jesuit. And sure enough, I've been, that. But thank you, that's nice. It's nice to know that. And the amazing thing too about the Sabbath School Quarterly now is the digital stuff.
Are you going to?
It's online everywhere, and there are 4 of us in the office, me and 3 ladies, and we kind of are in awe of how all over the world, and everybody and their brother are putting the Sabbath School Quarterly online, and it's driving the publishing houses nuts. And that's a whole other issue that's way above my pay grade. I mean, we just make certain strict rules for them that they have to follow, because you do not want, the GC, you do not want the GC lawyers on you. Okay, that's all I'm going to say. You don't want the GC. One time, I posted something and helped get the church sued. And one of the GC lawyers is like my best friend. But man, I get a scathing letter from him. We need to confiscate your computer. And he copied my VP. And he just, and it was all business. And I teased him later. I said, well, I'm not going to say his name, I know. But in the end, I respected that. He was my friend, but he wasn't going to let our friendship get in the way. He had to deal with the legal stuff. But what happens with the copy, we go out of our way. The lawyers will numerous times say, please stop doing this. Please, and it's amazing how patient they are. They go out of their way, they ask and that, but then in the end, we got to protect. Do you want all the whack jobs out there? claiming they're Seventh-day Adventists. You know what that, so and I respect the church. We need to protect that. So with the quarterly, we just make sure we've had people overseas charging for it. They put it up on whatever they charge, and then we get emails. Why is the GC charging for us to look at quarterly? Well, we didn't put it up. And sometimes when it's overseas, the laws don't. We got to deal with their over there. So it's a worldwide thing. It goes in about 126 languages as far as we know. And so how do you keep... I used to, at the very beginning, I had nightmares worrying about the translations. And then I finally said, I can't do that. I can't do that. I'm responsible for what goes out in English. After that, every now and then we get complaints, and then we will deal with, we have to go through the division. We will get in touch with the division, and then the division, and generally, I noticed from the day I got to the Sabbath School Quarterly, the church is very protective of the adult Bible study guide. They really don't want anybody messing with it because they understand the role that it has. So anyway.
Follow-up comment? Then I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Just really quickly, it's become more of just Sabbath school. It's become a ministry for us.
Yeah, well, that's what it's supposed to be. You read what Ellen White writes about Sabbath school and what it's supposed to be. It could be just outreach, and it's tough because we're Adventists. And yeah, I'm very clear, as long as I'm the editor of the Sabbath School Quarterly, it's going to be unabashedly Seventh-day Adventist, And I know there are some people that don't like that, but we've heard stories of non-Adventist churches using the Sabbath School Quarterly, which just baffles me. It baffles me. But hey, and the other thing too is, I'm sitting there working. My default mode is the more the merrier. I'm thrilled about all these people putting it up. But I remember years ago, I got a request from Poland. They wanted to put the quarterly up. Why, sure, go right ahead. Well, it turns out they're an offshoot group. And that they were trying to shut them down, but Clifford Goldstein gave us permission. Ooh, did I get slapped around on that one. It was like, but I didn't know. It was still, the digital stuff was new. I got chewed out on that, but I've learned. But ever since then, we get requests, and we work through their division. Hey, is this guy kosher? Who is this? Are they, and in most cases, they let them do it. We've had some problems here and there, but we generally, if the division says it's okay, then yes, we want to let them do it. So anyway, go ahead.
Okay, speaking of offshoot and or Jesuit, I received this text September 1st from a former church member. I'm going to read 2 paragraphs. It's related to the Trinity. Are you aware that many high-level individuals of the Adventist Church, including some, in quotes, elites at Loma Linda University Church, are currently debating the biblical integrity of the Trinity doctrine? In fact, the debate has never fully stopped since the adoption of the doctrine. Are you aware, he's addressing it to me, that the Trinity doctrine was given to us by the Roman Catholic Church in 325 AD at the Council of Nicaea? It was 1700 years ago that the doctrine was first made official, many hundreds of years before the SDA Church even existed. The beast power, in quotes, has essentially given us the definition of God that alone should be of concern. Have you had any articles or nut jobs talk about this?
Well, I hear it. Look, everything is Rome. I saw something on Facebook the other day. The Catholics killed Charlie Kirk because he was keeping the Sabbath, So you've got that wing of Advent. Look, The Adventist Church, a lot of our founders were not Trinitarians. I don't think Uriah Smith ever became one. I don't know if James White ever became one. Ellen White never used the word Trinity. Not because I don't think she believed in it, I think she did believe in it, but she knew how controversial it was. And when she came out with that Desire of Ages, Jesus from the day of eternity, Jesus was one with the Father. But we've got some good stuff. The Biblical Research Institute, they recently came out with some books. They gave them out at the GC session, books on the Trinity. They can't, our church is very solid, whether you like the word Trinity or not. I mean, to me, I don't know, I gave up a long time ago trying to make sense of any of it. I believe it. Like for me, the main thing, as long as Jesus is eternally God, the moment you make Jesus lower or created, you lose something important. So I don't pretend to even understand it, but that's always been an issue in Adventism. And BRI's got wonderful stuff. Look, we share a lot of things in common with the Roman Catholics, okay? They don't have anything wrong. In fact, it's funny. Two of my favorite non-Adventist theologians, one of them's a Greek Orthodox named David Bentley Hart. And man, he's off on a lot of things, but when you get him on the right things, he's brilliant. He's got this book that All May Be Saved. The first half of the book is the most powerful attack on eternal torment I've ever read. He's brought up stuff we've never brought up before. The last half of the book is probably the best defense you're ever going to find of everybody being saved in the end, which I find a horrific doctrine. I'm offended by that doctrine, okay? And then also he's got stuff on this new book out. Man, it opened my eyes, called All Things Are Full of Gods. And, Scripture says that God is the one in whom we live, move, and have our being. And we tend to think of that as just physical. But, how is it that 3 pounds, we're Adventists, we don't believe in a separate, conscious, immortal soul, okay? It's pure pagan nonsense. But what is our consciousness? How do we think? How do the chemicals, how do neurons firing chemicals across, how do we get thought? I've read so many, nobody has a clue. In fact, I bought in the airport on the way over here a Scientific American, and the whole issue was on consciousness. But Hart, I gotta be careful. He's not a pantheist. It's like God in whom we live, move. Look, it's behind everything. I had an article in the Adventist Review about a month ago called The Hydrogen Atom. It's the simplest atom there is. Just a proton, and an electron, I think. Okay? It's the simple. And yet it is so complicated. The math, it's so involved that, they can't explain it. So it's like you see the divine mind. It's like I see God's mind without getting into panentheism or pantheism, but somehow maybe the only way we have consciousness is through God in whom we live, move, and have our being. God's every atom in the cosmos is sustained by God. So maybe somehow the only way we could think is through the immanence of God in our. I don't know, but the point is, it really he's helped me on a lot. And there's this Roman Catholic named Ed Feser. And he wrote this book called 5 Proofs for the Existence of God. And whoa. I mean, these Catholics have had a long time to think of this stuff, okay? And these 5 proofs on the existence of God, I plowed through that book the best I could. He was deep. But wow, they were very powerful, logical arguments, for this. So I don't know, how did I get off on that? Oh yeah. Well, yeah. Anyway, that's right. Yeah. Anyway, whatever. But yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you. I wanted just a brief reminder to you. It's something what I mentioned to you just before we began this afternoon. If you don't mind if I say it publicly.
Sure.
So I met you for the first time at our recent general conference session that we had in St. Louis. We were in the where they have the displays of all the booths and everything. And I was looking at this one booth, and it had a list of several evangelists and preachers. And I was looking at the names there, and you just happened to walk by. And I said, "Hey, Cliff, thank you for the Sabbath school, that you guys were doing, that you had participated in." And I said, "Your name is here with all these preachers." HMS Richards was there, Joe Cruz was there, C.D. Brooks was there, George Vandeman was there, and your comment to me was, "Wow, how did I get in that group?" Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, why were you so surprised that you were in that group?
I figure I'm a writer. I don't see myself as, I vaguely remember it now. And yeah, I was sort of surprised at that, but whatever, But look, I tell people too, I've been 41 years at the GC. I've seen a lot of people come and go. And I don't even, big shots there, and I don't even remember their names. And I tell myself, it ain't gonna be any different with me. I'm there, you do what you could do, and then you go and you're forgotten. And I keep that perspective in mind, and it helps keep my feet on the ground. You're here, you do what you try to do some good. And then, I could throw out a bunch of names that most of you probably wouldn't even remember now. And it actually freaked me out a few times when some of the new people come to the GC. And I asked one of the leaders one time, "Did you know this name?" And he said, "No." And it freaked me out. But I could say this. I'm seeing a lot more new young people coming into the building at the GC. And I'm very impressed. Yeah, I feel really good about who I'm seeing coming in. And it's, Well, Peckham is like he's the Adventist star. He's probably going to turn out to be the greatest theologian in Adventist history. Yeah, well, yeah, this Adventist guy, he shows up out of the blue. Well, I guess John Peckham, and he wrote this. My wife thinks I idolize the guy. Don't make an idol out of this guy. But he writes this book called Theodicy of Love. And it's the whole great controversy. Our whole great everything with stuff that I never thought about. The whole everything. And it's published by Baker Books. The evangelicals published this book on the great controversy. In fact, when I told you my conversion story, that word, you're getting in my head now, conversion. When I told you when I mentioned for 40-some years, I was telling that story. And the part I left out because I forgot about it, I said, I go back to my room, I sat down, I put my finger on the keys, and the presence of the Lord Jesus came to me in the room. In that book, in the great controversy, he talked about the rules of engagement in the great controversy. And he said, it's mysterious. We don't really understand the rules of engagement. But when he said that, again, for 40 years, I've been telling that story. And I never told about saying that prayer. And then for some reason, when he said that, it brought back to my memory, whoa, I said that little prayer. And in the rules of engagement, I told you, Satan had me. But somehow, offering that prayer, and it was like that, that's when I started telling that. And I wrote that up, and I've written him personally. I've told him to his face. Oh, yeah, John Peckham is this young guy. He writes all these books. He's a superstar right now. But he went back to the seminary. But they've got more young people coming in. And, I hope the Lord comes back before then. But, they always talk about the delay. I remember I preached a sermon in Peru one time. And I said, look, I don't know when Jesus is coming back. I said, you know what? I don't really care. And they were, huh? I said, for me, the main thing is that he comes back. Because here's the thing. There's no, quote, delay. With our understanding of the state of the dead, I don't care whether you died 2,500 years ago or you die next week. Your experience is all the same. You close your eyes in death, and then boom, the next thing you're going to know is Jesus. So for every human being who has ever lived, I was reading my worship this morning, past few days, Genesis 5, the ages of those antediluvians. Who were these creatures living 900 years, and having kids, it's like, men of renown. In Hebrew, it's men of the name. They call them men of the name and giants. And then you read what Ellen White says. They lived all this, and then it says, Vayamot. And then they died. And then they died. And the only one, Enoch, goes. But the point is, I believe the first thought that every believer is going to have at the resurrection is going to be, wow, Jesus, your coming really was soon after all. Because, look how fast life goes by. Look how fast, I can't believe I'm going to be 70. It's just like, boom. And then, so that's how fast for every human being. I think the first thought's going to be, wow, it really was soon. That's how I believe Jesus could say, behold, I come quickly. Because it's as quick as our lives go by. All right, a few more minutes. I'm starting to wind down.
Well, one of my questions is the Adventist Church doing anything about college ministry to people of that age? Because I feel like a lot of people are being indoctrinated by even Adventist college into evolutionism and that sort of thing. And so this gentleman who was killed last week, Charlie Kirk, one of the things that was a gift of his, regardless of whether you agree with his ideology or not, was that he was able to communicate with college-age students. And so the question would be, is there anything the Adventist Church is doing or could do to reach the college-age students, including maybe our own universities that seem to sometimes be infiltrated by evolutionist thinking?
That's very unfortunate, evolution. Most controversial article I ever wrote. People were calling for me to get fired. And I was left, actually, at the time, the editor got left twisting in the wind publicly. Though I never backed off, and I'll never back off. I wrote an article called Seventh-Day Darwinians. And, it caused, and I couldn't believe, because basically I said, you believe in evolution, you don't belong in this church. And I still believe it. You know, at least have enough moral integrity. Have words become so cheap, everybody knows what seventh day, for add the 7 day points to. Okay, if I for one moment thought evolution were true, I'd reject the Bible, I'd reject Christianity completely. And I have read an immense amount of stuff of Christians trying to harmonize evolution with the Bible, and including stuff by Adventists, and they all come across like idiots. They make buffoons and fools, every last one I've ever read. And I respect Richard Dawkins. I really do respect Richard Dawkins. He's logical. He takes his premises to their logic. I have more, for many years, one of my heroes was this guy, William Lane Craig. He was probably, I think in many ways, I considered him the best Christian apologist out there. I don't know what religion he was. And he was so good. And then he wrote this book, The Quest for the Historical Adam. And it's so stupid. It's so, Adam and Eve were Neanderthals, were some kind of hominids. And 100,000 years ago, there was some kind of, what's the word? I'm getting tired. Mutation. Brain mutation that they suddenly got souls or something. In other words, and at this point now, I don't follow him anymore. I don't listen to him anymore. I used to, I have more respect for Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins is more logically and, more logic and intellectual integrity than William Lane Craig. I mean, some of the stuff he wrote was so, I couldn't believe how stupid it was. But that's what he has. And I'll never forget Desmond Ford. He was losing it even more and more, And see, when I joined the church at the height of the Ford thing, it took me a long time to work through it because not everything Desmond Ford had was wrong. And it took me 10 years to work through it. But towards the end, he bought into something called progressive creationism, which is basically theistic evolution with a little more input of the theos, okay? Theos, God, okay? But I'm not kidding. Ford wrote this book, and he sent it to me. What did the man think I was going to support this? And I wrote against it and got him mad, too. But he argued, I'm not kidding. This is what these poor schnooks have to do to try to make the Bible fit with evolution. He argued that the Adam of Genesis 1 through 3:24, which ends when the Lord put the angel with the flaming sword to keep him from the tree of life. He argued that Adam, I'm not kidding, was a totally separate man, separated by 100,000 years from the Adam in the very next verse when it said, and the man knew his wife, and it was a separate man. And what do you know? What a coincidence. The second Adam's wife was also named Chava, Eve. But that's what he argued. Total separate man, 100,000 years, and what do you know? That's what they have to do to try to, but yeah, it's bad. It's bad and it's in, I don't know what we could do. I mean, some of our own schools, you teach evolution to our students. Whew. You don't want me to, I could say something, but I'm not going to say it because I'd probably get in trouble over it. But yeah, I don't know. To me, I am so far beyond evolution. I look, I'm at the stage, I didn't get this way overnight. And I'm going to wind down because I am getting tired. I mean, I could honestly say not just the existence of God, but the existence of a loving God is the most obvious truth I know. I mean, I just see it so clearly. It's so, I mean, I know there's evil, but look, take heed lest he that thinketh he stands falls. You could hear next week, I threw everything out, okay? So I don't take, two things I don't take for granted. My faith, what else? My marriage, okay? Two things I don't take for granted. And it's easy to do both. But I mean, I'm at the stage where the existence of God in nature, in the trees, in the human body, in just the brain and everything you read, the complexity. I could believe, and I mean this, I could believe my iPhone evolved by chance quicker than I could believe a turnip evolved. Okay, I mean, it's so, and look, it's not the same thing. I mean, have any of you ever been to an iPhone factory? Have you been there? Have you ever seen them make an iPhone? You've never, how do you know? How do you you've never seen it, and so on. And, oh yeah, I mean, evolution, I'm so far beyond evolution now. It's like, it's hard for me to take anybody seriously. And when I meet a Christian, I don't care who they are, because I like to read outside of Adventism. I read a lot about, most of the stuff I read is in Adventist. And when I read and I could get some good stuff from, and David Bentley Hart's the only one. Yeah, he's bought into the evolution. He's the most brilliant human being if I didn't know better, I'd think there were 10 men. Because I don't understand how any one human being could be like this guy. But he's the only one that I could take seriously. But almost like William Lane Craig, I just wrote him off a couple of years ago. So, well, anyway, that's my little spiel for today. You wore me out. You wore me out. You wore me out. Yeah. Let me get some water.
Thank you so very much, Cliff.
Yeah, I had fun, but I'm tired.
I'm going to have a word of prayer, but before I have a word of prayer, I took a business trip, and Cliff had started working at the GC in Tacoma Park. So it was before cell phones. So I had to call him up, and I called him up, and I said, Cliff, my name is Jeff Rosenthal. I'd like to meet you. And I don't remember what he said on the phone. He just said, well, if you're going to be in the area or something like that.
1984, 85?
That was 89.
89.
And so I had to be in New Jersey for a few days for the business trip, and then we made our way down to Tacoma Park, Maryland to meet Cliff. So it was the old GC building, if you remember, any of you, and ugly looking building, by the way. But anyways, I go in the lobby, and I told the receptionist, I'm here to meet Clifford Goldstein. Oh, he'll be down in a bit. So the elevator comes down, it opens up, he looks at me, my girlfriend, my mom, and he says, what do you want with me? And I said, I just wanted to meet you. I wanted to meet a Jew who now is Messianic, because I had heard his testimony on a cassette before then. So ever since then, we became friends, and I'm just grateful.
What do you want with me?
What do you want with me?
My wife complains, Cliff, you can be so rude. I don't need to be.
But they were just quoting Jesus. This is the same thing that he quotes the
Did I do it with him? Oh.
And Jesus said, what do you want with me? Well, I didn't take it in a wrong way because subsequent to that, when I got into the ministry, he has been so kind to me because every church that I go to, I know without a doubt that I can text him, email him, and say, hey, will you come to my church? Undoubtedly. And so I'm grateful to him for his friendship. So the truth comes out. It's not me, it's Southern California.
I paid $2.75 a gallon of gasoline. $2.75.
And if we didn't wear him out, I asked him, come with me to the beach and we'll walk on the beach. But I think he's probably all worn out, so that's probably not going to happen. I just wanted to give him a little taste of, yeah, well. But we're grateful. I'm grateful, Cliff, for your friendship and for you being here. What's that? Maybe next time he'll walk on the beach with me, right? I even asked him to bring Kim out because I met his wife in Israel and his son and his daughter-in-law. But anyways, I'm just grateful that he came out. And yeah, thank you, Cliff. Thank you so much. And by the way, we took him to Carolina's husband's restaurant on Thursday, and we had a delicious Italian meal. So tell Martin.
Free dessert. That cheesecake. Man. Yeah, I know you like that too, huh?
So tell him thank you very much. The food was delicious. So let's bow our heads and have a word of prayer. Gracious Father in heaven, what a beautiful Sabbath, Lord. Thank you so very much for allowing us to worship you in Sabbath school, in the worship service, to fellowship over the physical food that you blessed us with, and then this afternoon, Lord. What a blessing it is to be able to rest in Jesus on your Sabbath day, Lord. But I also want to thank you for my friendship with Cliff, and thank you that he was willing to come here to be able to be our guest speaker today, Lord. I pray that you'll continue to bless his ministry at the General Conference as the adult Sabbath School editor, Lord. And I pray that you'll give him that strength and stamina to hang on however many years you want him to be there, Lord. But I pray, thanking you for the influence that he's had on this church, perhaps through the adult Sabbath School quarterly. Bless him, Lord, as he rests up this evening and he flies back. Take him back safely to his family. And Lord, one day we'll have that great reunion in heaven. Well, we won't have to say goodbye. We'll just be able to sit down in front of your feet and just recount these incredible stories, Lord. So till then, Lord, as we leave this place of worship, we thank you for allowing us to be here. Take us to our places. And until we see each other again, may we be a blessing to you and to others. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Thank you.